Thank you very much for coming today. We're pleased here to announce the Maine Working Class Cabinet for Bernie Sanders. I'm Ben Collings in Portland. I'm the state director. As you've been seeing on the news, nationally, the momentum has shifted to Sanders on the ground from Iowa to New Hampshire, all over the country. That momentum has reached Maine. We have people here today, elected officials, constitutional officers. We have county chairs of the Democratic Party. We have unions. We have business leaders, community leaders. The support's overwhelming. I'm very grateful that these people have joined us today to get the message out about what we're going to be doing here in Maine and across the country to elect Bernie Sanders. I want to start off, first of all, by inviting Matt Dunlap, Secretary of State, up here.
Hey, Matt.
Every election, and any election, can be seen as being one of the most important for the next several decades. But what Senator Sanders has been talking about in this national campaign, and what makes it so incredibly important, are the things that affect us in our own communities. I was driving through Old Town this morning and went by not fewer than 7 abandoned homes in the city of Old Town. 50 years ago in my city, we had 10,000 people on payroll. We had lumber mills, shoe factories, the 2 paper mills, on and on and on, all the businesses that supported that kind of community, and those communities were replicated all over the state of Maine, and they're all gone. International trade agreements that work against working people and the movement of jobs and industries overseas, using the mechanisms that favor large corporations, these are the exact issues that Senator Sanders has been talking about in bringing prosperity back to people like those my neighbors in Old Town and people across the country. And that's why it's so important to come out and be supportive in these upcoming caucuses in March in the state of Maine and support somebody who's actually going to fight for us and not talk about the macro issues that only support the wealthy, making sure that everyone pays their fair share in taxes so that we can support the mechanisms of democracy and freedom that keep us free. So I'm very proud to be here with my good friend Troy Jackson and all the people in the Working Families Caucus. And I encourage everyone to consider this candidacy very, very seriously, because this is, once again, an incredibly important election, maybe the most important for the next 50 years. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'd like to thank my friend, the Honorable Troy Jackson, for asking me to speak today. Public speaking isn't something that I'm really comfortable with, but I'm here today because I'm inspired by the courage and enthusiasm of people like Troy Jackson and Senator Bernie Sanders, who are fighting for working class Americans. I followed Senator Sanders' career over the years, and I'm here to support him in his run for President of the United States. Senator Sanders has my support because his fight for working class Americans has never wavered. I'm working in Augusta, doing my best to represent and fight for my constituents at home and citizens across the state. What has become increasingly obvious to me in my 3 years of service is that I'm also fighting for myself. I've worked a full-time and at least one part-time job for the last 3 decades so I could have access to health care and earn a livable wage. Senator Sanders' vision of an increase in the minimum wage, his efforts to gain tax cuts for the middle class, and his tireless work to protect Social Security, union jobs, health care, and veteran benefits will go a very long way toward putting the American dream back within reach of millions of Americans. Thank you very much.
Good morning, folks, or I should say good afternoon. So exciting to be up here and be joined by so many of my elected colleagues, my friends from around the state, also representing several generations. They're here, they join me in supporting Bernie Sanders. We're here to make sure that Bernie continues to make headlines and that our values are heard. As a young child, I remember my father. He worked as a teacher, my mother often working nights, walking to work because we had one car. On Saturdays, if we were lucky enough, my dad woke us up at 6 a.m. so we could go with him to his second job as a janitor at my grandmother's church. We went, it was a great thing we did, and my father showed us that hard work was what got you into the middle class. My parents taught us that if we worked hard, we would become part of the middle class. But that dream is slipping away for so many folks around this country and so many folks around the state. Healthcare costs continue to rise, wages are stagnant, and the lack of affordable college education is holding so many people back. I spent this last weekend reflecting on Dr. Martin Luther King's mission and vision. I have to say, I feel like we've taken a step back. Economic and food insecurity is increasing around the state, and the environment is putting so many folks at risk. We celebrated Dr. King's legacy this weekend, and for some people it meant a day off. But for too many people it didn't mean a day off. It meant a day working a low-wage, working in low-wage employment, struggling for childcare, and it also meant a day where children went hungry. A day because they weren't at school, they weren't provided a meal, and in rural places like where I come from, I looked around my district, and unemployment is still high. It actually hasn't caught up. It hasn't caught up to other places in the state of Maine, other places in the country where the unemployment rate might be lower. And I have to think that I blame foreign trade, and I have to blame our policies that have failed us. Whether it's free trade, some people call it, it's actually a bad deal for Mainers, it's a bad deal for this country. I look around, I look at those policies, and I have to continue to think that these jobs have been taken away from my friends and my neighbors, and the opportunity for the American dream is lost for many of those people. I'm here today because Bernie brings us hope. Bernie brings passion, and he shares anger. He shares the anger that many in this state share. Folks, let's face it, if you're not outraged right now at what's going on in politics in Washington, if you're not outraged by the disappearance of the middle class here in the state of Maine, then it's time to skip the cocktail parties. It's time to head down to the main street, to the coffee shop. It's time to talk to your neighbors. Talk to them about their jobs that have gone overseas. Your friends, your neighbors, they're all fed up. They're angered by policies that do not bring us jobs, they do not feed us children, and they do not allow for the elderly to live above the poverty level. I call on my fellow Democrats to join me to focus on our core values and to share our common vision as we head towards November. We must continue the comeback that is started by our president. We must continue the comeback story and make sure that the comeback comes back to rural Maine as it does in many places around the state and many places around the country. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Koki Giles, and I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for over 35 years. I work in Bangor. I'm also one of the vice presidents of National Nurses United. And I'm very proud to say that we were the first union to endorse Bernie Sanders. Caring, compassion, and community. These are the values at the heart of registered nursing. This is true at the bedside as nurses advocate for patients and families, and also beyond the walls of the hospital, as RNs call for environmental, racial, and economic justice in the name of public health. National Nurses United, which represents some 190,000 nurses nationwide, seeks to uphold that positive vision for the health of this country by endorsing Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie's issues align with nurses from top to bottom, and among them is insisting that health care for everyone is a right, not a privilege. Protecting Social Security and Medicare from those who want to destroy or privatize it, and working to expand both. Holding Wall Street accountable for the damage it has done to our communities. Understanding the threat to public health from the climate crisis, environmental degradation, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Support for minimum nurse-to-patient ratios for hospital patients, as well as sponsoring legislation to slash the high costs of prescription drugs. As RNs, we know that the broken healthcare system puts too many of our patients in jeopardy, and it's heartbreaking to see that there are people out there that can get better, they just can't afford it. Too many Americans remain priced out of access to health care. Bernie calls for guaranteed care for everyone with an improved, expanded Medicare for all. We could have a plan that could truly save the lives of our patients. And my son lives in Philadelphia, and the young people that are so energized by Bernie Sanders is amazing. But on the other end, my mother, who has been a lifelong Republican, lives in Florida. She's a resident of Florida. She went and changed to a Democrat, so she could vote for Bernie.
Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it because obviously in the legislative process, you never know if things are going to work out. And all these people that came here today show their dedication because they're trying to juggle so many things, and so I want to really wrap this up quick for them, get them back up there. But thank you all for coming. It shows the momentum that's happening in this state and in this country for someone that finally talks about the issues that affect everyday working class people and never backs down from the fights against the moneyed interests that we see with Senator Sanders. I mean, not only do we have elected officials, the Secretary of State here, county chairs from the Democratic Party, candidates, we also have unenrolled voters, Greens, and even earlier Representative Lockman, a Republican, said that he liked Senator Sanders so much, and you've seen him here videotaping it. So we're very happy to have all these interests coming forward to support Senator Sanders. And so I just want to thank you. I've got the list of all the endorsements. Obviously, you can't get this many people all in one place at one time. But just to talk about the momentum that Senator Sanders brings and what he represents to the working class people in the state, just today, 3 more people actually signed up, elected officials, to want to be on this cabinet. So thank you. I certainly, if any of the legislators want to stay, if there's any questions for them, please. Go ahead. If they have to leave, I understand that too. But if okay.
House members need to leave.
Well, thank you again. And any questions, Senate members can stay, and certainly myself and Ben and Kofi and others can take them.
Thank you.